people might have this, that, and the other perspective or default styles or habits or whatever, but in this team, this is how we operate. These are the
Yeah.
norms. This is how it's structured. We understand that for some of you, to give concrete, direct feedback is going to be sort of against the grain of your cultural background, but perhaps not, depending on where what your background. So on. The point is that it shouldn't be. I don't think it should be a free for all
Hmm.
for team for leaders or managers. I think that it sort of highlights the importance of actually structuring and creating cultures within teams and within organizations to be successful and to be able to sort of corral and manage all this diversity.
Global teams, distributed workforces, hybrid offices, these are the architecture of modern work. But behind all the technology and logistics, there lies a human layer that determines whether collaboration actually works. Culture, communication, and the pressure to adopt without losing your sense of self. Hello, everyone. I'm Bilal, and I'm very excited to welcome you all back to another episode today. Tonight, we're joined by Andy Molinsky. Andy is currently professor of organizational behavior at Brandeis University and a renowned author of three groundbreaking books: Global Dexterity, Reach, and Forging Bonds in Global Workforce. For over 15 years, Andy has been at the forefront of understanding how people navigate cultural challenges and how adaptation happens in the modern organizational life. From the psychology of stepping outside your comfort zone to the micro behaviors that actually enable collaboration to work across different cultures, different contexts, and different teams. All that without losing authenticity. I think his insights could not be more timely as we stand at the intersection of globalization and artificial intelligence. So, without further ado, let's dive right in. Andrew, thank you so much for taking out the time for doing this. Really excited to diving into this, such a crucial topic with you.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. So I want to start off with, something that'll help us uh, have a look into this fascinating journey that you've had so far. The arc of your research work that you've done. You've written, research papers, books, Global Dexterity, Reach, and Forging Bonds in, global workforce over the course of a decade and a half. You've been consistently, exploring how people adapt under pressure. I would really like to know, looking back, what's that common thread that ties all your work together?
I think I mean, the basic common thread is I'm interested in how people um, can handle tough situations at work, basically, uh, and how they can learn to step outside their comfort zone, whether their personal comfort zone or their cultural comfort zone. I'm also quite interested in sort of the backstage psychological experience that people have and
Hmm.
what sort of the obstacles are and some concrete strategies that they can develop to overcome them. I always try to in my work, I always try to make things simple without making them simplistic. So, I mean, you could get tremendously complex, but then no one will be able to use it. So,
Right. So, but how did it all started, right? Did you really get into this field of learning more about organizational behaviors, cultures, people adapting under different, conditions? So, where did it all begin? Where did that interest come from?
um, well, I think I would credit my PhD advisor, Richard Hackman, when I was at Harvard.
Hmm.
He was an organizational psychologist, and I think his work really inspired me um, to look at multiple sort of levels of analysis, looking at a problem from multiple perspectives, like looking internally inside what people's psychological roadblocks or challenges might be, and then how that might translate into their behavior and what you can kind of do about it. And so his work was very different. It was about how to design jobs and how to structure teams, but I think the way that he approached these topics inspired me. I think I sort of like kind of soaked it up, and then I eventually learned to apply that to topics that I was interested in. So I would credit him really, in my experience of being there in the sort of early, mid, and late 1990s.
Awesome. Awesome. So I would like to, move on and to exploring uh, one of the key topics that you've written about and explored about is microprocesses of adaptation. So, one of the things that you've highlighted in your writing is that adaptation is not really about sweeping transformation, right? But more about microprocesses, right? This the small steps people take in the moment when facing a challenge, right? Could you share some of those processes and why they matter so much in shaping, I'd say, long-term growth?
I think one of the most powerful ways to help people change and develop and grow is to hone in on specific situations, like moments in time, and sort of deconstruct those moments in time to understand what aspects of those situations are challenging, what that evokes in them psychologically, emotionally, and how they can use resources at their disposal to overcome those challenges. I find that a lot of times people think very broadly in terms
Mm,
of like super general perspectives. And I think that for individual people, it's much more um, useful to think about specific situations, because the other thing is it's sort of like learning a language. You learn how to study or master a certain language, and along the way you learn the sort of implicitly the process of how to do that, and then you can sort of translate that to other contexts and situations. And I think if you start small in terms of these micro moments, um, you can sort of develop an awareness that you can then carry into other situations as well. I think it's more tractable, and more concrete also for people. So that's why I tend to focus on, I guess you could call them microprocesses, but just basically situations, like very specific situations.
And I was reading about how one can actually reframe the anxiety of adopting to different contexts and cultures. Reframing anxiety as excitement as well, right? How would you describe that for someone new to context, new to a different culture?
Reframing, you mean?
So, when you have anxiety about adjusting to different cultures, right? But you reframe that as an excitement to being part of something new.
I see, I see,
Right?
I see. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, of course I should say it's easier said than done. It's easy to say to someone, "You need to reframe your anxiety." So, like, yeah, they're like,
Yeah.
"What? I can't do that. I'm so anxious, I can't think of anything else." If the anxiety hits a certain threshold, people can become paralyzed by it, and they don't have the capacity to reframe and so on. So I think it's best to try to think about those things in a moment where you're not as anxious, so that you can maybe then apply it to moments where you are a little bit more anxious. So, but that said, I think if you can think of anxiety as sort of, there are a variety of things. First of all, you can normalize it. You can realize that you're not alone. I think a lot of people stay in their own head. People, because anxiety and discomfort can be taboo to talk about. I think people can then draw the inaccurate conclusion that they're alone, they're the only ones, when in fact they're not. And I try to do that in my teaching and writing to sort of normalize these types of situations that so many people experience, so that people don't feel bad. The worst is to feel bad about being, to feel bad about feeling bad, right? you know, uh, and also I think that people can. I suppose it depends what the anxiety is about. Usually, the anxiety is about something. So, for instance, let's say the anxiety is about incompetence. People worry that they won't be able to do something, or they can't do something well. Well, what if you try to see that anxiety as courage? That you're actually, you're human. You're trying something that's outside your comfort zone. Wow, that's pretty good. You're trying to stretch, you're trying to learn, you're trying to grow, and that might be consistent with your values. That's important. Or maybe if you make a mistake, or if you don't achieve what you wanted to achieve, you could think of that as data for improvement. That it's not sort of like it's not a litmus test on
Mm,
your sort of self-worth or something like that. It's data for improvement, and that's how you improve. The only way you can improve is to do that. You think about when you were a little kid learning to ride a bike or something like that. Those falls are not, they don't sort of cast some terrible shadow on your like innate ability as a bike rider. No, they're learning moments, right? You know what I mean? And so
absolutely. Yeah.
I think that those are some ways that you can sort of reframe anxiety. But as I say, I think it's really important to say that it's easier said than done, and especially in the moment when people are overcome with emotion, you don't have the capacity or resources to do that.
I agree. And this will help me connect to the next questions, where in Reach, you argue that discomfort is often the gateway to real growth, right? That's a powerful idea because so many of us to try to avoid discomfort rather than embrace it, right? Why do you think discomfort is such an effective catalyst, and what kind of strategies people could use to push through it without really burning out?
Yeah, so discomfort comes from the act of actually trying something that is outside your comfort zone as opposed to avoiding it. And
Hmm.
I think we're all very good at avoiding things outside our comfort zones because it gives us the short-term relief, right? It
Yeah.
has like you get the positive reinforcement of a short-term relief. You're like, "Whew, I don't have to deal with that." But of course, over if you take a long-term perspective,
Yeah.
it's not like it's gonna be easier the next time. So
Yeah.
so the discomfort is evidence that you're actually trying something, and I think that the key thing is that when you're trying something outside your comfort zone, whether it's giving a public speech or speaking more assertively than you're used to, or speaking up in a meeting or whatever it could be anything. Um,
Hmm.
the I think what's really important about the discomfort the fact that, is that you're learning, and you're never going to learn anything if you avoid, right?
Yeah.
If you avoid a situation, you literally will never learn anything about it.
Yeah.
But if you try it, even with discomfort, and if you can tolerate it, you can learn. And what I find often people can learn is that, well, first of all, they learn that maybe the situation is a little bit less challenging than they thought it was, or maybe aspects of it are, and maybe they learn that they're a little bit more capable than they thought they were. Not perfect by any means, but that the sort of fantasy, that the negative fantasy they have
Yeah.
sort of outside the situation um, is disproportionate to what the reality is, right? And so you're learning, and in terms of so I think that's why it's so powerful, to actually try something even when you feel discomfort. In terms of addressing the discomfort and addressing the anxiety and all the other emotions that you can have, I tend to look at 2 different sort of styles of sort of strategies. The first is kind of in your mind,
Yeah.
the reframing stuff we talked about before, and there are a variety of ways you can do that, and that can be powerful. Um, and the other one is behavioral. I think, can people often don't realize the leeway they have in terms of making a situation their own. They can do something in a way that's a little bit more comfortable for them. There's no there's very few situations in the world where you have to act in a completely prescribed manner, like that there's no leeway, no give, usually there is, and you can find ways to tweak a situation so that it feels a little bit more authentic and comfortable to you. And if you combine that with some reframing, um, and then some experience in the situation and learning, I think you set the odds in your favor. In life, you're never it's never going to be a one-to-one thing. It's never going to like shoot you to the moon in some
Yeah.
perfectly
Yeah.
positive trajectory. It's all about increasing the odds, and
Yeah.
so you're setting yourself up for, I guess, a better chance of getting into a positive spiral where you're learning, you're growing, you're noticing, you're a little bit less anxious, maybe you're experimenting with different ways to try something, and that's a very different mindset than being terrified and avoiding.
Absolutely. I think it's like how people try and grow through discomfort, right? Not despite it.
Yeah.
There's a very big
Exactly.
difference.
That's courage.
Okay.
If you like, it's courage is doing something, in the presence of fear, as opposed to avoiding it, or doing something without fear. I mean, courage is doing hard things.
Yeah, absolutely. I have this point in my mind. Like, do you think that there's a risk in trying to embrace, discomfort, and that trying to embrace discomfort, people start to glorify it, right? Chasing hardship for its own sake rather than growth, right? How do you draw that line between productive discomfort and unnecessary struggle?
Hmm. It's a good question. um, productive discomfort and unnecessarily struggle. I suppose it depends on what on making smart choices about what what to work on, personally, what skills you're trying to develop, and understanding why you're trying to develop them, and
Mm,
whether it matters to you, and also whether now is the time to work on those particular skills. I mean, we can't you can't you don't want to like overload yourself, because I think that that'll be hard. You probably need to do it in a bit of a piecemeal fashion.
yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe people are very different. And there could be some
Yeah.
people there's could be some people who are, they're people, for instance, who are adrenaline junkies, and, like, they just thrive on the most extreme sports or extreme activities, and
Yeah.
others would be terrified of those. So within the human population, you're gonna get a wide variety of people, and so,
Yep.
it's hard to speak to the and it's possible that there just are people like that who sort of chase discomfort. It's also a very personal thing. You'd have to really understand and unpack why they do that, and so on. It's hard to talk about in the abstract.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, I'll bring in your book that you recently did, uh, Forging Bonds in a Global Workforce. Right, you introduce a metaphor of culture as a spice blend. Right, the idea that we each bring multiple cultural influences from national to professional to organizational. Right, I'd love to hear how you see this as playing out inside modern organizations, right? How can leaders at the helm of these organizations can really leverage this blend to build stronger connections across teams that are distributed across borders?
Yeah. So the idea of the spice blend is in contrast to a lot of the research and perspectives in global work that classify people as where they come from. So you're Indian, oh, you're like this. I'm American, oh, I'm like this, or something like that, where there's a tremendous amount of other factors that are influencing us, right? Namely our personality, for instance, but also our life experience, our upbringing, our the region of the country that we're part of, our professional experience, and so on and so forth.
Mm,
So people are, our educational background, what we've been exposed to. Um, so people are much more complex than sort of the nation or national culture that they come from. In terms of leading and structuring organizations, I think that the levers and tools that managers and leaders have to structure teams and structure organizations and develop organizational cultures ends up being quite important, because people are, coming if people are so varied in terms of their perspectives, experiences, and so on, for a leader or for an organization to be able to be successful, people might have this, that, and the other perspective or default styles or habits or whatever, but in this team, this is how we operate. These are the
yeah,
norms. This is how it's structured. We understand that for some of you, to give concrete, direct feedback is going to be sort of against the grain of your cultural background, but perhaps not, depending on where, what your background, so on. The point is that it shouldn't be, I don't think it should be a free for all
mm,
for leaders or managers. I think that it sort of highlights the importance of actually structuring and creating cultures within teams and within organizations to be successful and to be able to sort of corral and manage all this diversity.
I agree. Yeah, and cultural dexterity, is like one of the core topics. I was reading your work, and this one word just came coming up, right? You often describe cultural dexterity like as a personal skill, right? And enterprises also play a very key role in preparing talent for an increasingly, global context. But I feel like, for much of the late 20th century, global companies did this by rotating employees across teams and regions, right? And that way they help them develop more, I would say, a cosmopolitan perspective. But today, 2025, when technology allow teams to integrate and collaborate globally without really relocating, how should organizations help bridge help the talent bridge that cultural shift?
Mm. It's a good point. And there are limitations, obviously, with
Hmm.
virtual. Um, I tend to think that what's most important is not worrying about the differences, but trying to focus on and leverage the similarities and common experiences, to create sort of trust and connection on teams. And from a virtual perspective, that means building in opportunities for like personal connection on whether it might or might not be in the context of a call or a meeting. It might not be. It might be sort of meetings that it might be meetings or opportunities to gather that, have nothing to do with work, but actually are virtual opportunities to have fun and to get to know each other and to
Yeah.
build trust. Maybe it's also offline. Maybe it's asynchronous. Like for instance, on a like a fun photo sharing channel on a Slack group or something like that,
Hmm.
or whatever it
Yeah.
might be. But there's I think that becomes, and ideally you actually have opportunities to meet as well in person in real life, to you don't have to always meet, but to have some opportunities to meet so that you can sort of get a real, um, sort of in-person perspective that you then carry back into the virtual world. Though I have to say that I personally have developed some strong friendships with people, professional friendships, let's say, or professional connections with people that I trust and respect, and it's only been virtual. I've never met them.
Yeah.
But I think it's possible, but you also have to be motivated. So that's the other thing. To be able to be effective in any situation in life, you need basically two things. You need to have the ability, and you need to be motivated. You need to want to. And so that's another factor that organizations need to consider. Organizations need to give people the skills and also the opportunities. That would be availability. I'm sorry, that would be ability. But they
Yeah.
also have to somehow, you know, I don't know, make people actually want to. Like, you know, so that is a challenge. It's not the easy. I think it's a challenge, and I don't think all organizations do it well. Um, but I do think, by the way, that you can develop cultural skills virtually as well, because even though you're communicating virtually, you're still encountering someone, um, visually. There's a lot of, you're not able to see them sort of in life, but you're able to see them on the screen. You're able to communicate with them. You're able to offline communicate with them, and a lot of the communication and norms and, you know norms around timing, norms around, how much people disclose about themselves personally, norms around expressed emotion, all these types of things that can be culturally discrepant. That happens virtually too. So you can teach someone global dexterity and they could be more successful, in a virtual world too. So
Yeah, I agree.
it's not a perfect answer, but I don't, it's a messy question, to be honest. I don't have like the perfect
No,
answer.
I get your point, but because I'm saying that the concept of remote teams for some of the biggest companies in the world, right, is now very common, right? And these teams are not just like they're working as executors. They've created teams in the global south, right? Work doing some actual knowledge work. They're actually doing the ground level work for these companies, right? So it's very important for them to be feel a part of that culture, right? But for them, someone new to a culture of a North American company, someone working in the global south, right? Someone in Lahore, right, is now working for a big company in North America. How can they adopt to that culture, right, without losing their own self as well, right? The uniqueness their own culture, their own personality brings to the table as well. How can they do that in their effort to adopt to that culture?
I think it's critical for people. There are multiple things, but I think that in terms of the North American culture, I think it is critical to find opportunities to build personal connections as slow or fast as they happen. They might be slow, but to
Yeah.
find opportunities to do that, to actually find, opportunities to sort of personalize and get a sense of the person, the whole person. I think that's a universal thing. People care about that they're known and seen and appreciated. I think
Yeah.
that's a universal type of thing. And I think creating opportunities for that to happen virtually is a challenge that all these organizations need to solve. And if it's not something that's top of mind, I think that it's not gonna happen. And I think that you're gonna lose the potential for sort of trust and motivation, which are critical for these organizations. I think also another thing is, it seems small, but it's important, is the timing of meetings. I think that, if someone in Pakistan, for instance, what's it, like a 9-10 hour difference from the East
Yeah.
Coast, something like that,
Yeah.
to be able to be able to be, at the very least, be aware that you're inconveniencing someone's daily life by
Oh,
having meetings at a certain time. And
yeah.
at the other extreme, if it's a recurring meeting, to switch times, you know what I mean? To find times that work. I, for instance, have been so I have a training program that I run, where I certify coaches and trainers in global dexterity.
Mm.
And I work sometimes with people in Japan. I just was the other night, and I meet with them my time at 8 o'clock at night, which is the next morning for them,
Mm.
and it's more convenient for them. It's not so convenient for me. After a long day, do I really want to be on an intense call at 8 o'clock at night?
Yeah.
It's not my preference, but I'm willing to do it because I don't think it's fair for them to have to accommodate always to my schedule. But that's a because I think at the end of the day, that it's not just about timing, it's about who matters here. Like,
Yeah.
it's about
Yeah.
who matters.
Yeah.
And if you're not sort of addressing that question through timing, or through opportunities to connect and to get to know someone personally, make some form of connection that can build trust, I think that you're missing out on a really important element. Now, the problem could be, of course, that the way that people build relationships can be quite different in different cultures. Personality matters too, of course, but there could be different cultural norms. For instance, one example could be, you know, that power. Like it might be quite uncomfortable for someone to sort of um, uh, reveal personal information and sort of talk about themselves or their family or whatever it might be with someone who's much higher in power than them. For instance, they might not be used to that, or they might not be comfortable, or there are a litany of different ways that
Yeah.
relationship building differs across cultures. Now, if it could differ across cultures, but that doesn't mean that someone from a particular culture is going to be characteristic of how you might assume they would act because they're from that culture. So you have to be aware of that too. But the point is that it's a bit of an experimentation process. You have your goal, which is you want to create some form of personal connection and trust,
Yeah.
and you're probably going to experiment with a bunch of different ways to do it. And
Yeah.
I think leaders need to have that mindset.
Absolutely. Yeah. And moving into the technology aspect, and while I was trying to formulate my points for you, I thought the mention of global capability centers. I wanted to, ask you a question around that, right? Technology, I'll start with that. Technology is not just changing how we collaborate, right? But it has changed how organizations right now are being structured, right? Companies are scaling where knowledge and capabilities reside, right? Through global capability centers, setting up shops in those regions in global south, right? Pakistan, India. In some ways, this creates a new type of cosmopolitan, right? People embedded in local hubs, but they're connected to global flows of work. From your perspective, how do you think that these kind of structures like global capability centers, they really shape an organization culture that is now spread it across the globe with these capability centers? And what challenges or opportunities do you think they might create for cohesion across borders?
Mm, it's a good question. Um, I don't have a perfect answer to that one because I mean it's hard to disentangle the fact that organizations that are distributed, Like, are we talking about culture, or are we talking about distributed organizations? Because 'Cause they're both distributed and they're from people from different cultures, right? So
Yes.
is it the distributed nature of them? Like, if they were all local in the same physical space essentially, but they were different units and different departments, would there still be a potential coordination and integration issue? Or
Mm,
is it the fact that it's so far away? Or is it the fact that they're from a different national culture and might have different norms about, the workplace norms? Or is it all of the above? Like,
yeah.
it's a hard question to answer, and I suspect it differs on the, by organization. So I don't know. I'm always someone who likes to, as we talked about earlier, likes to look at very specific situations. And so I have a hard time sort of on that particular question generalizing. But I see your point that it's a different way of working, and it could set the stage for some challenges of integration. But you know I'm not sure I have a good answer to that one.
Yeah, I think it brings both opportunities and challenges as well, because as I read about it, brings you access to a larger context as well. Because of course, when there's diversity in cultures, there is diversity in context as well, and these people can think differently with local context, and that I think brings a lot of cohesion in terms of the culture for the organization itself as well. So,
Well, I'll say one other thing as you're talking. I think in these situations, what can really benefit an organization are people who are sort of bridges, cultural bridges, people
yeah.
who can sort of like go-betweens, like people who are comfortable and fluent, so to speak, in both worlds. And I think, like, the more of those types of folks who are connectors and bridges, I think the more successful it's going to be. That would be my prediction. And how do you find them? Well, whether you find them or train them or both, like, I think it's quite possible that you can find people, but it's also possible you can probably train people who have some potential
Yeah,
to do that.
I agree. But now, we're facing this another transformation, very critical transformation, AI, right? And automation. They're not really changing how the work is done, but how teams and enterprises are designed, right? And I feel like some people could argue that this disruption could be as significant as the globalization itself, right? Given your years of research on adaptation and growth, how do you see AI really, reshaping both an organizational culture and the skills people need to thrive in these new times?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Um, you know, I I I think that I think we're so early that I don't think we really know. I mean, I don't really know. I know AI is being, like, I think people are experimenting with, I mean, experimenting with AI in a variety of different ways in a variety of different fields. Obviously, people are using it, but I mean experimenting in terms of, like, um seeing how it can be, like, deeply integrated into what we do. Like, I was hearing the other day, someone was telling me that there was a prediction um that because of AI we would need very few radiologists, people who read x-rays in the medical world, because
Mhm.
AI could just do it. Well, it turns out that actually there are more radiologists now, I guess, who need
Yeah,
to use who need to play other roles and be able to leverage the power of AI. So it's going to change. It definitely is going to change people's jobs. There's no question. And there's going to be some people who lose jobs because of AI. And it's possible that that's a bad thing, because some of those junior level jobs that are replaced by AI, you're not getting people who where are those people who were in those junior level jobs? Because those are the people who ultimately, the best ones, will move up the ladder and become more of the senior leaders, and they'll have that deep experience early on in their career that maybe will help them. But if those people aren't there, it's going to be it's possible that there are going to be a lot of I don't know, maybe there'll be a much more even fluid workforce, and that culture it'll be harder to maintain the culture of an organization because it's just gonna be a bunch of, like, mercenaries,
Yeah.
going to travel like, the ultimate, like, extreme version of the portfolio career, people, like, popping all over the place because AI can just do so many of the basic things, but what does that, what impact does that have for an organization's culture? I don't know. I think all these things are big fat question marks. I don't if someone has a real strong concrete answer about this, I don't know if I would trust them.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the optimistic view is that AI will boost human productivity, that and expand people's capability as well, enabling more decentralized organization structures. But on the flip side, I think it could fragment functions, uh, reduce human to human collaboration, and if that happens, what do you think happens to culture? Who maintains it?
Right. Well, that was the question I was sort of referring to that in my earlier comment.
Yeah,
Um, I suppose at the um extreme, you've got a bunch of I mean, this is AI, by the way, that's not currently not in sort of fully functioning robots, right? But the future
yeah,
could be actual fully functioning robots that have
yeah.
AI
Let the
as
AGI
as
come
their
in.
brain, you
Yeah,
know, and that's a different world. I mean, then you're talking about, like, the culture of almost like dual species, like humans and robots who are powered by AI, and that's just like it's almost like it feels like sci-fi, but,
yeah,
that it's also not unrealistic. I think it could happen for sure, and then you have to talk about the sort of the kinds of cultures there. I think that, my sense is that organizations and professions are currently in a big debate about how much to use AI, how much like how authentic is AI? Should it be replacing what we do? Um, should we be using it as a partner in work?
yeah,
Should it
yeah.
replace who we are and what we do? How much of the human part is lost? These are all good questions. I don't know the answer, but they are things I think about, though. I definitely think about them in my world.
But despite all these questions, I think we still see pretty much everyone like full steam ahead into the future. But despite the fact that there are these risks, there are these challenges, they're still heading into it, and
Yeah.
I feel like the uncertainty is really taking over people in organizations, people pretty much everywhere, and
And
we're
it
not
depends
even.
it depends on the field. Like, I don't think AI is gonna replace, like, home builders
Yeah,
anytime soon, or it's not gonna replace plumbers or electricians anytime soon. Maybe if there were robots in the very, very, very far future, but these physical, you know, or someone who goes to a doctor, even though doctors might use AI, but like they're or a massage therapist, or though I have seen massage therapists for robots do it. So I mean, I don't know. I think it depends on the field. There could be I'm a professor, there could be, professors teaching in the classroom. But the thing is that I don't think in my world, for instance, I don't think being a professor is simply about disseminating knowledge. I think it's also about engaging and inspiring people. And can AI do that? I don't know.
yeah,
I don't know. Probably right now, no, but maybe in the future, I don't know.
maybe, yeah. And lastly, if we see technology mediating, most of our interactions, as we're saying, happens right now, and we will see it keep progressing at a much faster speed. Do you think that our sense of authenticity, the thing that you've always written about, it'll become harder to hold on?
Um, in terms of like what example? You mean like writing something?
Yeah, you can say that. Yeah.
Yeah, like if we have a chat bot that has been trained on our style. Like, if I have a chatbot that's been trained on my style with all my
Yeah,
communication, and then you ask it to sort of take over my communication, and it
yeah,
communicates just like me, is how authentic is that? I actually saw just today, I actually on LinkedIn, I saw a professor I know at a university, and they have these AI bots of the professor. And I was going to ask him how it worked, but basically, like, he's it's him, but then AI took over and is creating gestures and words, and I think it's been trained on him and his background, and so you can ask him a question, and you see him, but it's
yeah.
AI answering the
It's
question.
AI answering.
And so it's been trained on him. I don't know enough about it. I asked him because I want to learn more about it, but is that authentic? Well, I suppose it depends on what you mean by authentic. You know,
Mm,
that's a definitional thing because it is all based on him, and it's genuinely coming from the body of work that he's produced. It, I don't know if it's authentic or is it just different. Yeah, I mean, I suppose at the end of the day, it's maybe what matters is how people feel who are on the receiving end.
yeah,
Oh, do they feel that this was maybe authentic's not important, maybe it's do they feel that this was do they feel helped? Do they feel like their question was answered? Do they feel heard? And so on, you know what I mean? And can an AI bot that's been trained in my style who's also been trained to respond in a respectful, empathic way or something like that? I think yes, probably.
yeah,
And I don't know. Maybe is that authentic? It's not authentic maybe in the strictest sense of
yeah.
authenticity, but maybe just we'll have to develop new language for capturing that. I don't
I
know.
agree.
Yeah.
I agree. We even I see these tools like 11 Labs. It can mimic your voice exactly like the way you sound, and you would not be able to tell the difference
Yeah,
if
the
it's
deep
me.
fakes and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right. No, it's true. It is true. So it's not authentic in the sense that it's not actually you, but
yeah,
does it feel authentic? Well, that's the whole nature of a deep fake. If a deep fake's effective, it feels authentic because
mhm,
that's what it is, right? That
yeah,
it gives you the illusion of authenticity. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's a very, very interesting, like, future, and, I don't have the answers, but I'm curious and very fascinated to learn about it.
yeah. Exactly. We're definitely heading into the uncharted waters.
Yeah,
I
for sure.
So, well, Andrew, thank you so much for taking out the time for doing this. I'm sure this topic of cultures, authenticity will keep becoming more and more and more crucial as we see this progression keep happening. At double, triple speed every year. I think in the next 10 years it'll
Yeah,
be a completely new scenario to
I
see.
agree. I agree. It's really interesting to think about, so thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for taking out the time. Thank you. We'd love to have you again, and take care. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye.